As warriors, traders, and eventual settlers, the Vikings facilitated cultural exchanges on an international scale. But they also disrupted the lives of the cultures they encountered and often made an impression that was less than positive. As a result, the Vikings' contemporaries saw them as inhumane, fierce, and filthy. However, in reality, Vikings valued cleanliness and grooming, and they paid a great deal of attention to their personal appearances. Today, we're going to take a look at what hygiene was like for the Vikings. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other hygienic cultures you would like to hear about. Okay, let's see how clean these Norsemen can be. During the era of the Vikings, Scandinavians were, in general, highly concerned with their appearance, particularly their hair. According to records in a chronicle attributed to a 13th century English monk called John of Wallingford, the Vikings would comb their hair every day, bathe every Saturday, and change clothes frequently. According to John, the purpose of these customs, which he saw as frivolous whims, was to draw attention to oneself. Viking men liked to wear their hair long in the front with shorter, shaved locks in the back, what many today might call a reverse mullet. The long sections may have been worn pulled back, something women of the time also might have done with their long hair. The extent to which Vikings modified their teeth is a matter of some debate among historians, but there is evidence to that effect. Archaeologists discovered filed teeth among the remains at Scandinavian burial sites in 2005 and in England in 2009. The teeth were intentionally filed with grooves that may have indicated victories against opponents. Another theory proposes that the filings were meant to intimidate their enemies. Equally mysterious is what exactly the Vikings used to do the filing. While archaeologists still have no hard and firm answers, the evidence suggests the work was done by a skilled practitioner. If there's one thing archaeological evidence makes clear about the Vikings, it's that they knew the value of a good comb. Viking burial sites reveal individuals who were buried with military tools, as well as combs and other personal items. These combs were typically made of bone, antler, or metal, as were their tweezers, razors, and ear picks. Items used for grooming were usually ornately decorated, and as evidenced by the holes drilled into them, were probably worn on a chain that was either attached to the belt or hung around the neck. Sometimes they were even worn as brooches. Vikings at times also carried combs in boxes, attesting to the tool's importance. Vikings, the original bearded hipsters. Most, if not all, Viking men had facial hair, and their culture dictated that they keep that hair neat and tidy. Grooming tools like razors, combs, and tweezers were just as likely to be used on beards and mustaches as they were on the hair atop a Viking's head. Of course, there were other considerations. The length of one's beard was considered an indicator of maturity and even masculinity. A lack of facial hair could open one up to being mocked. In the 13th century Icelandic work, Njál's Saga, the title character, Njál, is described as wealthy in goods and handsome of face, although no beard grew on his chin. His lack of facial hair receives continued mention, even earning him the moniker Beardless Karla, while his sons are called dung beardlings. Due to his lack of facial hair, Njál's competence and manliness are constantly called into question. The text even implies that his sons, or at least their hair, were derived from dung rather than their father's fertility. Viking baths and saunas were visited for both cleanliness and enjoyment. Washing in a local stream during the summer months could provide much-needed relief from the heat, while bathhouses and saunas offered warmth and a chance to sweat during the winter. Bathhouses and saunas also served as meeting places and were thought to have medicinal value. A cold bath could ease aches and pains, while steam was believed to revitalize the spirit. Bathhouses and saunas could be constructed near natural hot springs or by using water heated in large vats. According to the sagas, some Vikings even had advanced piping systems to move hot and cold water to their baths. Snorri Sturluson, the Icelandic writer who recorded much of what we know about Norse paganism today, is believed to have built an elaborate bath at his farmhouse in Reykholt. Though it may come as a surprise to many, there is evidence that some Norse communities had latrines near their longhouses. The Viking sagas mention latrines that were set some distance away from well-traversed and populated living spaces. These latrines were communal, but there are some suggestions that group facilities may also have been built inside longhouses. For example, one kamar, or privy, discovered at Stoink included trenches that carried waste away from the longhouse to an outdoor location. Archaeologists also found an outdoor latrine at a former Viking settlement in Denmark. After analyzing the contents of the 1,000-year-old latrine, researchers discovered it contained parasites carried by both humans and animals. These included roundworm, human whipworm, and liver fluke, the latter of which most commonly affects cattle and sheep. The latrine also contained evidence that suggested the worm infestations from the Viking Age contributed to a genetic anomaly that affects modern descendants of Vikings. Their genes adapted to counteract intestinal parasites and prevent potential diseases, creating a mutation that may now, unfortunately, lead to lung cancer. Viking families lived in longhouses, which were structures made out of wood with roofs made out of turf or straw. Benches that could be used for sleeping or sitting were typically built along the walls. Warmth, light, and a place to cook was provided by a fire that was usually set in the middle of the house. But since they had no windows, this meant the longhouses were typically smoky. The dirt floors also contributed to a generally dusty, ash-laden environment. The longhouses would generally be shared by extended families, which meant that privacy wasn't really a thing. During the cold months, the animals would take refuge in the longhouses right along with the people. This further crowded the situation and probably didn't help with the smell. According to Graugaus, or the laws of early Iceland, humiliating a fellow Viking was considered an extremely serious offense. How serious? Well, the law actually stated that if a man cuts hair from someone's head or makes him dirty anywhere in order to disgrace him or tears or cuts clothing off him, the penalty in every case is outlawry. To declare a person an outlaw, the injured party had to bring witnesses to a meeting of the Althing, the assembly that served as something of a judicial authority for Vikings. Only the Althing could pronounce a sentence of outlawry, but the individual, the involved families, and society as a whole were then responsible for enforcing that punishment. Full outlawry, the type of outlawry that sometimes resulted from causing humiliation, was a lifetime sentence that removed an individual from any and all legal and social protections. So to sum it up, Vikings took cleanliness so seriously you could lose all of your rights and legal protections for getting one of them dirty. Alongside their great concern for cleanliness and grooming, historical sources suggest that Vikings were equally concerned with the state of their clothing and overall presentation of self. Both Viking men and Viking women wore clothes made out of wool and linen, which would be washed in nearby lakes and streams. According to the Havamal, an Old Norse poem preserved in a 13th century work called the Codex Regius, though he may not be very well dressed, of his shoes and breeches no man should be ashamed. While John of Wallingford indicated that Vikings bathed only on Saturdays, writings from the Viking Age itself indicate that men cleaned themselves, at least to some extent, every morning. No one knows for sure, but daily washing is believed to have most likely included cleaning one's face and hands. According to the poem Hreesmal, which is also found in the Codex Regius, men needed to comb their hair and wash themselves every day, for unknown it is where that eve he may be. Similarly, Havamal is also known as the Words of Odin the High One, states that men should be fed and washed when venturing out for the day. Despite all this, Viking hygiene habits still left a few things to be desired. According to the 10th century Arab Muslim diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan, Vikings, particularly a group known as the Rus, do not clean themselves after excreting or urinating, or wash themselves when in a state of ritual impurity. And just to be clear, that last part meant they didn't bathe after having sex. So naughty. Vikings did not use forks. Rather, they ate with spoons, knives, and sometimes their fingers. The knives they used for eating also tended to be used for grooming, hunting, fighting, and just about whatever else they might need a knife for. Spoons were usually made from wood, as were the bowls they ate from. Like grooming utensils, Vikings kept their spoons and knives close, often being worn around the neck on a chain or attached to their belts. According to the aforementioned Ibn Fadlan, who observed the group of Vikings known as the Rus in the 10th century, every day without fail, the Vikings would wash their faces and their heads with the dirtiest and filthiest water there could be. He then described how every morning a young serving girl would come with breakfast and a great basin of water. She would proffer it to her Viking master, who would then wash his hands and face in it, as well as his hair. That doesn't sound so bad, but Ibn Fadlan also said that after the Viking would wash and disentangle his hair in the basin, he would then blow his nose and spit and do every filthy thing imaginable in the water. Which is kinda gross, but not that horrible. Hang on. After that, the servant would carry the bowl to the man next to him. Okay, that's pretty gross, but it goes on. Then he says, she goes on, passing the basin round from one to another until she has taken it to all the men in the house in turn. And each of them blows his nose and spits and washes his face and hair in this basin. That is super disgusting. But there's some debate over how much truth there is to what Ibn Fadlan said he saw. He was an Islamic diplomat, and Viking practices were anathema to his own sensibilities and beliefs about cleanliness. So there's a good chance he may have exaggerated, at least a little bit. On the other hand, they might have just been that gross. Oh, you Vikings. So what do you think? How does your hygiene stack up to a Viking's? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.